To talk more about this, I want to bring into the conversation Brian Sobel. He's a political analyst. Brian, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now. We do know that, as Marco Rubio has confirmed today, all 99 members did vote in favor. The only vote that was missing, and that was Rubio himself, who had to step down to officially accept the role of Secretary of State. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Marco Rubio it becomes the 72nd Secretary of State in our nation's history. As a historical reference, our first Secretary of State was Thomas Jefferson, appointed by George Washington, and he served as Secretary of State from 1790 to 1793 after being Minister to France. So not too many Secretaries of State in our nation's history, because it's such an important role and tends to speak to the stability of the Secretary of State's office around the world. And getting a vote of 99-0 was significant, but I think it was because Rubio is a well-known person in the Senate. Most of those people he's worked with from time to time, or all the time, in the case of the Republicans. And he was an easy start in terms of these confirmations. Now there is going to be some rough sledding, as the package points out. Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and of course, Pete Hegseth.
And it is going to be interesting. I also want to put this tweet up on your screen. This is where we heard from Vice President now J.D. Vance. Congratulations to my friend Marco Rubio on being sworn in as our next U.S. Secretary of State. J.D. Vance also said, quote, that Rubio was a needed departure from a generation of failed foreign policy. What are your thoughts on this statement? What can we expect from Rubio, who is now going to be in this role? What should we be expecting to see come from his office?
Well, first, Marco Rubio knows the world very well, and as a longtime senator. So he is going to come into office with a much firmer hand, a good grasp on things. And I think he'll begin the arduous traveling of the world, as all secretaries of state do, setting out the Trump agenda to foreign leaders and foreign apparatus all over the world about where Donald Trump wants to take this country. And he's very clear that it's going to be a different Secretary of State's office. I think when he's dealing with these very problematic countries around the world and individuals around the world, I think he's going to be a very firm hand, suggesting that the United States will use whatever means it needs to use to make sure we are treated fairly around the world.
And it will be interesting. We did just have that tweet also on the screen. Who's going to be replacing Marco Rubio with Ashley Moody, of course, as well. This is her tweet saying, getting ready and posting 2 American flags. What do we think of this next transition as well into the Senate?
Well, the person coming in, obviously, is a hand-picked person from the Trump administration. So it won't portend any changes to the Senate in terms of how they are going to walk in lockstep to the extent that they can with President Trump and what he is going to put forward to the American people through the Congress of the United States.
And I do want to ask you as well, with Rubio, of course, we know that him and Trump do have a relationship. What do we expect this to look like over the next 4 years? We know that Rubio did pledge to advance Trump's America First policy. Do you think that we'll see any hiccups in their relationship as it does continue to go over the next 4 years?
I don't think so. I think Donald Trump probably spent quite a bit of time with Marco Rubio talking about what his vision is. And Marco Rubio would have had to agree to the agenda, and does agree with the agenda by all appearances. And so that America First phrase that we're hearing, I think, is what Marco Rubio is going to take to foreign leaders around the world. What I'm going to be looking for, and your viewers should be looking for, is where Marco Rubio starts this trek across the world to deliver this message from Donald Trump. That will be very interesting. Who is he going to meet with early in his time as Secretary of State?
And it is also going to be interesting because there are so many others, as we were mentioning, that do have the long road ahead of them as they seek to be confirmed as well. We have to talk about Pete Hegseth. Of course, we know this is Trump's pick for the defense secretary today. His former sister-in-law told lawmakers in a sworn affidavit that Hegseth had a problem with alcohol abuse and that his behavior caused his second wife to fear for her safety. That was also touched on in that story that we heard today from Aisha Hasni. Do we think that this is going to affect his path to being confirmed? As you said today, Marco Rubio seemed to be very easy. What about Pete Hegseth?
Oh, I think he's going to face a lot of opposition by Democrats, maybe even some Republicans. That the head of the Department of Defense is one of the most critical positions we have in the government, especially when you consider what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in other parts of the world, including in Africa. This is a troubled world, and so he is going to have to go through a process. He's already appeared, of course, but he has to go through a process to continue to try to convince members of the Democrat Party and maybe, as I say, a few Republicans to end up with the confirmation.
And another one that we're keeping an eye on as well right here, Brian, is also Elise Stefanik. Her hearing was held today as well, showing you another live look that we have there at the Capitol. She's a Republican from New York, and she's Donald Trump's nominee to represent the U.S. at the United Nations. What are your thoughts on this pick, and do you think that anything that stuck out today from her confirmation hearing?
Stefanik is a solid pick by Donald Trump for the United Nations. And very much in the spirit of, say, a Nikki Haley, she's going to advance our interests at the United Nations. And the members of the United Nations will, I think, hear very clearly from her about our position on a number of issues around the world. I think she's confirmed rather easily, in contrast to some of the other names we've talked about.
Do you have any others that you're on the lookout for? As we know, these confirmation hearings, some of them are scheduled, some of them are not. But what should we be looking out for in the next few days and weeks?
I think the play in the Senate is what we look for as to who is going to kind of slide through in a pretty easy fashion, like Marco Rubio, which was an easy pick for senators to say, hey, the first person out of the box, we can vote for that person, but we are going to have an argument about some other people. And you saw that with Chuck Schumer's comments about whether people, some of these selections have the proper backgrounds to take these positions. So I think you're going to see this is where Democrats are going to fight a lot of these picks. And of course, the marquee names among those, again, are really Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Hegseth. So you're going to see this. Some will, as I say, slide through because the Senate has to pick their fights. The Democrats will have to pick their fights. And I think some will slide through and others will, it'll be a real toss up in the Senate as to whether they can get the votes.
It'll be something interesting and certainly something that we're going to continue to follow right here on Live Now from Fox. Of course, Brian Sobel, political analyst, here to help us break down the very latest as it pertains to these Senate confirmations. Any last thoughts before I let you go, Brian?
No, maybe the last thought would be, buckle your seatbelts because it's going to be interesting over the next few days and weeks as Donald Trump tries to get his cabinet in place to move forward. And it'll be very interesting to watch.
And we certainly will be watching it. Thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now. We appreciate your time.
Christina, have a great evening.